The crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the oak room like scattered diamonds. Maya's reflection multiplied in a dozen mirrors. As she moved between tables, champagne bottle angled perfectly. The room hummed with wealth. Silk ties, diamond cufflinks, laughter that cost nothing, because everything was already paid for. She refilled a glass at table 7. The man didn't look up. At the center table, Richard Castellan held court. Billionaire CEO, real estate empire, face on magazine covers. He gestured grandly as investors leaned in, mesmerized by promises of returns that would change their lives. Maya approached with fresh bottles. Her uniform, crisp white shirt, black vest, emerald green tie, made her invisible. That was the job. Be present but unseen. Gentlemen, tonight we make history, Castellan announced, raising his glass. Maya poured champagne into crystal flutes. Her hands moved on autopilot, while her eyes tracked the contracts spread across the table. Black ink, corporate seals, signature lines waiting. Castellan's lawyer leaned close, voice dropping to a whisper. Maya's hand stilled mid-pour. Once they sign, the offshore accounts are untraceable. Shell companies dissolve by Monday. The words hit like ice water. By the time anyone realizes, we'll have liquidated everything. The lawyer's smile was surgical. Maya's heart stopped. The bottle trembled. Champagne spilled onto white linen. Castellan turned toward her, irritation flickering across his perfect smile. Careful now. The tray slipped from her hands. Crystal exploded against marble. Champagne spread like blood across the floor. 20 faces turned toward her. Maya stood frozen in the wreckage, mind racing. The contracts. The signatures. The truth no one else could hear. 12 hours earlier, Maya had tied her emerald green tie in the staff locker room, checking her reflection one final time. 3 years at the Grandeur Hotel had taught her the rules. Smile, serve, disappear. Big event tonight, her manager Claudia said, reviewing the schedule. Contract signing in the Oak Room. High-profile clients. Best behavior, Maya nodded. High-profile meant generous tips. Tips meant another month of tuition paid. She was 26 and exhausted. Morning classes at community college studying paralegal work. Afternoon shifts at the hotel. Night study sessions fueled by coffee and determination. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford, but she was close. 1 more year and she'd have her certificate. Maybe then she could stop serving champagne and start serving justice. The Grandeur Hotel occupied an entire city block downtown. Marble floors. Oil paintings. Guests who thought nothing of spending her monthly salary on a single dinner. Maya had learned to navigate their world without belonging to it. She'd grown up in a different city entirely. A 2-bedroom apartment. A grandmother who worked double shifts. Dreams that felt impossible until her grandmother made them feel inevitable. You're smart, Maya, her grandmother used to say. Don't let anyone make you forget that. Maya carried those words like armor. The Oak Room prep began at noon. Maya polished glasses until they gleamed. She arranged flowers, ivory roses with gold ribbon. She memorized the seating chart, matching names to faces from the society pages. Richard Castellan, real estate magnate, 43. Built an empire from a single property into a billion-dollar portfolio. The investors were established names. Venture capitalists, hedge fund managers, a retired judge. They're signing a partnership agreement, Claudia explained. New development project. Luxury condos on the waterfront. Maya had walked past that waterfront. Abandoned warehouses. Broken windows. Families who'd been promised revitalization for decades. Maybe this would finally help them. She positioned champagne buckets at strategic intervals. Checked the temperature. Adjusted the lighting. Everything perfect for people who expected nothing less. By 6 p.m., guests began arriving. Maya fell into rhythm. Greet, pour, retreat. Her smile was professional. Her movements efficient. She was good at her job. She had to be. This job funded everything else. Between pours, she thought about her contract law assignment due. Monday, formation, consideration, capacity. The legal framework that turned promises into Obligations. She'd read somewhere that contracts were civilization's foundation, agreements that built trust between strangers. Tonight would prove that wrong. The signing ceremony began at 8. Maya stood along the wall with other servers, ready to refill glasses on cue. Castellan commanded the room effortlessly. His suit, royal blue, custom-tailored, cost more than Maya's car. His smile belonged on billboards. His voice carried authority that made people lean forward. "Gentlemen, we stand at the threshold of something extraordinary," he began. "The Meridian Waterfront project will transform this city. Luxury housing, commercial space, a development that will define the skyline for generations." The investors applauded. Maya poured champagne as conversations swirled around her. "Projected returns are conservative at 40%, Castellan's CFO added, "based on current market analysis and pre-construction sales." One investor, the retired judge Harrison Webb, studied the contracts carefully. "The corporate structure seems complex. Multiple subsidiaries. Standard for projects of this scale," Castellan assured him. "Tax efficiency, liability protection, all legally sound." Maya moved closer with her bottle. The contracts lay spread across the table. Her paralegal training kicked in automatically. She recognized standard clauses, formation language, consideration terms. Then she saw something wrong. The subsidiary names didn't match the incorporation dates. Mountain Ridge LLC showed a formation date of March 2024, but the registration documents beneath listed March 2025. A year in the future. She poured slowly, eyes scanning. Another subsidiary, Coastal Ventures Holdings, had financial statements showing assets of $80 million. But the bank verification letter was dated last week, and the asset acquisition dates were scattered across the next 6 months. Assets that didn't exist yet, recorded as current holdings. Maya's hand trembled. Champagne nearly overflowed the glass. "Easy there," an investor said, not unkindly. She smiled automatically and stepped back. But her mind raced through her contract law textbook. Fraudulent inducement, material misrepresentation. Void ab initio. Castellan was lying. The documents were fabricated. She glanced at Castellan's lawyer, a thin man with silver hair and cold eyes. He whispered something to Castellan while investors reviewed the papers. Maya edged closer, pretending to check a nearby water glass. "Once they sign, the offshore accounts are untraceable," the lawyer murmured. "Shell companies dissolved by Monday. By the time anyone realizes, we'll have liquidated everything." Castellan nodded almost imperceptibly. "The Swiss transfers?" "Already arranged. Cayman backups if needed." Maya's blood turned to ice. This wasn't just fraud. It was systematic theft. Castellan would take their money, funnel it offshore, and disappear behind dissolved corporations. The investors would be left with nothing. No assets, no recourse, no way to recover their millions. "Shall we sign?" Castellan produced a gold pen with a flourish. The investors reached for their pens. Maya saw Harrison Webb's hand move toward the signature line. She had 30 seconds. Maybe less, her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Silence protects no one but the guilty." But this was Richard Castellan. Billionaire, power broker, a man who could destroy her life with a phone call. The pen touched paper. Maya's champagne bottle slipped. She grabbed for it, knocked the tray. Crystal glasses tumbled in slow motion. The crash shattered the room's elegant silence. Maya stood in the wreckage of broken crystal, champagne spreading across marble like accusation. Every eye in the room fixed on her. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'll clean this immediately." Castellan's smile held no warmth. "Please do." She knelt, gathering shattered glass with shaking hands. Her mind screamed at her to speak, but her voice had disappeared. These were powerful men. They wouldn't believe a waitress over a billionaire, would they? Claudia appeared with a cleaning cart, face tight with professional embarrassment. "Maya, kitchen now." Maya followed, legs unsteady. Behind her, conversation resumed. The signing would continue. In minutes, those investors would lose everything. In the service corridor, Claudia's voice was sharp. "What happened out there?" "I'm sorry. Maya's throat closed. "You're normally so careful. Are you sick? Do you need to go home?" Home, where she could pretend she hadn't heard anything, where she could be safe. Her grandmother's watch pressed against her wrist. The leather band was worn smooth from years of wear. Her grandmother had worn it through double shifts, through illness, through the endless fight to keep Maya fed and housed. Truth is the only currency worth having. Maya had been 8 when her parents died. House fire, faulty wiring the landlord had ignored for months. Complaints filed, inspections requested. Nothing done. Her grandmother tried to sue. The landlord had powerful lawyers, connections, money. The case was buried under paperwork and delays, until her grandmother couldn't afford to continue. "The system protects the powerful," her grandmother had said, voice bitter. "But that doesn't mean we stop fighting. It means we fight smarter." That was why Maya studied law, why she worked herself to exhaustion, why she refused to be powerless again. "I need to go back in there," Maya said quietly. Claudia frowned. "You're clearly not—" "I need to go back." Through the corridor door she heard Castellan's voice rising in a toast, heard the shuffle of papers, the scratch of pens. She had seconds left. Maya's grandmother had died 3 years ago, 2 months before Maya's first day at the Grandeur Hotel. Cancer, quick and brutal. She'd spent her final days in a hospital bed, holding Maya's hand. "Promise me something," she'd whispered, voice thin as paper. "Anything. Don't let them make you invisible. You hear me? Don't let them look through you like you're nothing." Maya had promised. She'd kept that promise by studying, working, clawing her way toward a future her grandmother would have been proud of. Her paralegal program was at night. Community college downtown. Professor Chen taught contract law with a prosecutor's precision. He'd spent 20 years in the DA's office before retiring to teach. Fraud, he'd lectured last week, is the corruption of trust. When someone signs a contract based on lies, it voids the entire agreement. But proving fraud requires evidence, documentation, paper trails. Maya had taken careful notes. She'd always taken careful notes. Her grandmother had taught her that too. "Pay attention to everything," she'd said. "The powerful make mistakes because they think no one's watching. But someone's always watching." Maya thought about the waterfront families, the promises of revitalization, the hope in their eyes when Castellan's development was announced. If Castellan's fraud succeeded, that hope would die. The project would collapse. Those families would be forgotten again, and the investors, they weren't all billionaires. Harrison Webb had mentioned his pension fund investment. Retirement savings. A lifetime of work, gone because they trusted a smile and a gold pen. Maya had spent 3 years being invisible, moving through rooms of wealthy people who never saw her as anything but staff, background, furniture, but tonight she'd been exactly where she needed to be. Close enough to hear, close enough to see, close enough to act. Her phone sat in her vest pocket. She pulled it out with trembling hands. Through the corridor door she could hear the signing ceremony continuing. To new partnerships, Castellan's voice boomed. Maya opened her camera. She had one chance. Professor Chen's voice echoed in her memory. "Evidence changes everything. Without it, truth is just another opinion." She pushed through the corridor door, heart hammering. The room was a blur of expensive suits and crystal glasses. She moved along the wall, invisible again. The contracts lay on a side table, temporarily set aside while investors toasted. Maya's training took over. She photographed everything. The mismatched dates, the impossible financial statements, the subsidiary registrations that didn't align. Her hands shook, but the images were clear. A server passed, blocking her from view for precious seconds. Maya photographed bank letters, asset schedules, incorporation documents. Castellan's lawyer glanced her way. Maya pretended to check a champagne bucket. She had the evidence. Now she needed courage. Maya stared at the photos on her phone screen, her paralegal training connecting dots at lightning speed. This wasn't just fraud. It was architectural, built in layers to hide itself. The shell companies formed a maze. Mountain Ridge LLC, owned by Coastal Ventures Holdings, owned by Meridian Development Corp. Each company listing assets that didn't exist, secured by loans from banks that would never be repaid. Castellan would dissolve the bottom companies first. Mountain Ridge Coastal Ventures gone. The investors' money would flow upward through the maze and disappear into offshore accounts. By the time anyone questioned anything, the corporate structure would be vapor, beautiful, criminal, devastating. Maya's heart pounded so hard her vision blurred. She'd studied cases like this in class. Professor Chen called them paper tigers, corporations that looked powerful but held nothing but debt and lies. The trick, he'd explained, is timing. Fraudsters move fast. By the time victims realize what happened, the money's gone and the companies are dissolved. No assets to seize, no trail to follow. Monday. The lawyer had said Monday. The investors would sign tonight. Transfers would happen over the weekend. By Monday morning, the shell companies would be dissolved and Castellan would be untouchable. Maya looked at the contracts again. At the bottom of page 7, she spotted something else. A mandatory arbitration clause with a Cayman Islands jurisdiction. Even if the investors discovered the fraud, they'd be forced into arbitration in a foreign country with courts friendly to offshore money. Castellan had thought of everything, almost everything. He hadn't thought about the black waitress in the emerald green tie, who'd studied contract law every night for 2 years, who'd learned to read legal documents in the margins of her exhaustion, who remembered what it felt like to watch power crush truth. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from Professor Chen. See you Monday for the contract law exam. Don't forget to review fraudulent inducement. She'd been reviewing it all night. Maya scrolled through her photos one more time. Clear. Detailed. Damning. This was evidence that could stop everything if anyone would listen. At the center table, Castellan raised his glass again. Gentlemen, shall we make this official? The investors lifted their pens. Harrison Webb paused, squinting at a clause, but Castellan's charm worked like gravity. I've worked with hundreds of partners, Castellan said smoothly. My reputation speaks for itself. His reputation. His power. His absolute certainty that no one would challenge him. Maya thought about her grandmother, about invisible people who saw everything, about the moment when silence becomes complicity. She opened her email and sent the photos to Professor Chen, to herself at her school. Address, insurance. Then she took a breath that felt like jumping off a cliff. Her voice cracked the room's elegant silence like thunder. Stop. Don't. Sign anything. 20 faces turned toward Maya, like a single organism. The room held its breath. Castellan's smile never wavered. He turned slowly. Champagne glass still raised, eyebrows lifted in polite curiosity. I'm sorry? Maya's legs felt liquid, but she stepped forward. The contracts. Don't sign them. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Castellan set down his glass with careful precision. The help has something to say? The word help landed like a slap. Maya felt her face burn, but she held her ground. Those contracts contain fraudulent information, she said, voice shaking. The subsidiaries, Mountain Ridge Coastal Ventures, the formation dates don't match. The assets are falsified. Silence. Then more laughter, louder now. One investor wiped tears from his eyes. Castellan's expression shifted to something almost kind, paternal. I appreciate your concern, but these are complex business matters. Perhaps you should return to serving champagne. Harrison Webb frowned, looking between Maya and the contracts. What do you mean the dates don't match? Maya pulled out her phone, hands trembling. I photographed the documents. Look, Mountain Ridge shows formation in March 2024. but the registration certificate is dated March 2025. The financial statements list 80 million in assets acquired across 6 months, but they're recorded as current holdings. Let me see that. Webb reached for her phone. Castellan moved faster. He gestured to security. 2 men in black suits materialized from the corners. I think we've been patient enough. The offshore accounts, Maya pressed on, desperation sharpening her voice. The lawyer said once you sign, the offshore accounts are untraceable. Shell companies dissolve by Monday. Castellan's lawyer stood, face hardening. That's defamation. Serious defamation. I heard you. Maya locked eyes with him. Both of you. You said the Swiss transfers are arranged. Cayman backups if needed. For one heartbeat, something flickered in Castellan's expression. Not anger, calculation. Then his smile returned, wider than before. Gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. Clearly this young woman is confused. Perhaps overworked, perhaps something else. The implication hung in the air. Drugs, mental illness, anything but truth. Webb still held the contracts, though, studying them with narrowed eyes. Richard, these dates are perfectly standard, Castellan interrupted smoothly. Forward-dated projections for tax purposes. Completely legal. My attorneys can explain if you'd like, but I assure you, I'd like to see her phone, Webb said quietly. Castellan's smile finally cracked. Just for a second. Then he nodded to security. I think that phone represents a serious breach of confidentiality. Photographing private documents. Security moved toward Maya. She backed up, clutching her phone. I sent the photos already. To my professor, to myself. You can't erase them, can't I? Castellan's voice dropped to silk. Defamation has consequences. So does corporate espionage. So does making false accusations against people with very good lawyers. Security grabbed her arm. Maya jerked back, but another hand closed on her phone. Wait. Webb stood, but Castellan placed a hand on his shoulder. Harrison, please. Let's handle this appropriately. We'll investigate her claims through proper channels. If there's any validity, which there isn't, we'll address it. But right now we have a signing to complete. Maya watched her phone disappear into a security guard's pocket. The evidence, her only protection. Gone. Security escorted Maya toward the service exit. She twisted back, searching for Webb's face. He was still standing, still holding the contracts. Still uncertain. Please, she called out, just check the dates. Verify the subsidiaries. That's all I'm asking. Castellan's voice followed her, warm and reasonable. Gentlemen, I apologize for this unfortunate interruption. Clearly, this employee has some personal issues. The hotel will handle it appropriately. The door swung shut behind Maya, cutting off the elegant room. The service corridor was harsh fluorescent lighting and concrete floors. Reality after illusion. You're done, one security guard said, not unkindly. Should have kept your mouth shut. They led her to a basement office. Windowless, a metal desk. 2 chairs. Maya sank into one, her body suddenly too heavy to support. Through the ceiling she heard muffled sounds. Conversations resuming. The ceremony continuing. Claudia appeared, face pale. Maya, what were you thinking? Mr. Castellan is threatening to sue. The hotel, you, everyone. He's committing fraud, Maya said numbly. Millions of dollars. You're a waitress who overheard a private conversation and made wild accusations against a billionaire. Claudia's voice cracked. You understand what that means? You're fired immediately. Security will escort you out. And Maya, he's pressing charges. Corporate espionage, defamation. His lawyers are already drafting. The room tilted. Maya gripped the desk edge. Fired. Sued. Destroyed. Above them she heard a burst of applause. The signing was complete. She'd failed. She'd risked everything and failed. Castellan's investors had just signed away their futures, and Maya had nothing to show for her courage but ruins. Her phone was gone. Her job was gone. Her credibility was gone. Security stood by the door waiting to escort her out. To make her disappear one final time, Maya looked at her hands. They'd stopped shaking. In the fluorescent silence, she felt something strange. Not regret, not quite. She'd spoken. She'd tried. Her grandmother would have been proud of that at least, even if it cost her everything. Maya sat alone in the basement office for 40 minutes. Security had stepped outside. Claudia had left to handle the disaster upstairs. No one wanted to look at her. Through the ceiling she heard the party winding down. Laughter, goodbyes, the sound of powerful people moving on with their lives. She'd been fired before. Different jobs, different reasons. But this felt different. Final Castellan wouldn't let this go. Men like him didn't forget embarrassment. They crushed it. Her phone was gone. Her evidence was gone. Her job was gone. She thought about her apartment, 1 bedroom, 4th floor walk-up. Rent due in 2 weeks. Tuition due in 3. Her grandmother's watch on her wrist suddenly felt heavy as an anchor. Don't let them make you invisible. But maybe invisible would have been safer. Smarter. Survival was a valid choice. Her grandmother had survived. Had raised Maya. Had made it work despite everything stacked against them. Maya had just thrown away survival for principle. For strangers who'd never know her name, the door opened. Security returned. Time to go. She stood on legs that felt borrowed. They walked her through back corridors, through the service entrance, out into the alley behind the hotel. The night air hit like cold water. October wind. The smell of garbage and exhaust. The real world after the golden illusion. Sorry, the security guard said. He actually meant it. For what it's worth, took guts. Guts didn't pay rent. Maya walked toward the street, each step feeling like walking underwater. She'd parked 6 blocks away. Staff wasn't allowed in the guest lot. Her vest pocket vibrated. Maya froze. Her phone was gone, but she pulled out her backup. An old phone she kept for emergencies. It had one text message, Professor Chen. Got your photos. Call me immediately. This is big. Maya's hands started shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. Maya called from the alley, fingers numb against the phone screen. Professor Chen answered on the first ring. Maya, where are you? Outside the hotel. They took my phone. They fired me. Castellan's threatening to sue. Slow down. Start from the beginning. She told him everything. The overheard conversation. The mismatched dates. The confrontation. The evidence she'd photographed before security confiscated her phone. Silence on the other end. Then, you're certain about what you heard? The offshore accounts? Monday dissolution? I'm certain. And you sent me photos of the actual contracts? Everything I could capture. Formation documents. Financial statements. Bank letters. The whole structure. More silence. Maya heard keyboard clicks. Maya, I'm looking at these now. This isn't just fraud. This is RICO territory. Organized financial crime. The kind of case that makes careers. His voice shifted, gaining energy. I have a contact. FBI white-collar division. She owes me a favor from the old days. FBI? Maya's voice cracked. This is federal wire fraud. Securities fraud. Mail fraud. If Castellan's moving money offshore before Monday, we have maybe 48 hours to stop it. Keyboard clicks intensified. Where are the investors now? Still at the hotel, I think. The signing just finished. Good, they haven't transferred funds yet. Once money crosses borders, recovery becomes nearly impossible. Professor Chen's prosecutor instincts were fully engaged now. Listen carefully. Don't go home. Don't go anywhere predictable. Castellan has resources and he will use them. Meet me at my office in 30 minutes. Professor, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm telling. I spent 20 years watching rich men buy their way out of consequences. Not this time. His voice softened slightly. You did the right thing, Maya, the hard thing. Now let's make sure it counts. Maya looked back at the hotel. Its windows glowed golden against the night sky. Inside, Castellan was probably celebrating. Probably certain he'd crushed the threat. He'd underestimated the black waitress in the emerald green tie. He'd underestimated what invisible people could do when they decided to be seen. 30 minutes later, Maya sat in Professor Chen's office surrounded by contract law textbooks and case files. He'd called his FBI contact, Special Agent Rachel Morrison, Financial Crimes Unit. She arrived 20 minutes later, 40-something. Sharp eyes. No-nonsense voice. "Show me everything," Morrison said. Maya's photos were already displayed on Professor Chen's laptop. Morrison leaned forward, eyes scanning rapidly. Her expression never changed, but her stillness told Maya everything. "How long have you been studying paralegal work?" Morrison asked. 2 years. "You caught things my junior agents would miss." Morrison tapped the screen. "These formation dates. Elementary mistake, but easy to overlook. The financial statements, much smarter catch. Most people wouldn't notice the temporal inconsistency." "Can you stop him?" Maya asked. Morrison smiled for the first time. "Can I stop him?" "Maya, you just handed me a gift-wrapped federal case. But we need to move fast. If Castellan suspects anything, he'll accelerate his timeline." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my team. We'll need warrants. Lots of them." The FBI moved with surgical precision. By midnight, they had warrants. By 1 a.m., they were ready. Morrison's plan was simple. Hit Castellan while he was still celebrating, before he could hide anything. Before Monday's dissolution, at 1:47 a.m., 3 black SUVs pulled up to the Grandeur Hotel. Maya rode with Morrison and Professor Chen. Her heart hammered against her ribs as they entered through the front doors. Not the service entrance, not the back alley, but through the main entrance like she belonged there. The Oak Room was still occupied. Castellan and several investors, including Harrison Webb, drinking bourbon and celebrating their new partnership. Morrison didn't knock. She pushed through the doors with her badge raised. 6 agents behind her. "Richard Castellan, FBI, we have a warrant for your arrest and seizure of all documents related to the Meridian Waterfront project." The room exploded into chaos. Castellan stood slowly, his confidence fracturing at the edges. "This is outrageous." "On what grounds?" "Wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering." Morrison's voice was flat, professional. "You have the right to remain silent. This is harassment based on the ravings of a disgruntled employee." Castellan gestured toward Maya, who stood in the doorway. Harrison Webb followed the gesture. His eyes widened. "The waitress, she was telling the truth?" "She was telling the truth," Morrison confirmed. She nodded to her agents. "Seize everything. Contracts, computers, phones, all of it." Castellan's lawyer tried to intervene. "You can't just—" "We can." "We are." Morrison spread documents across the table. Mountain Ridge LLC, formation documents dated March 2024. Except the state registration shows March 2025. Coastal Ventures Holdings. 80 million in assets that don't exist. Bank verification letters with signatures from accounts opened last week. She looked at the investors, her voice softening slightly. "Gentlemen, you were about to be defrauded of approximately $47 million. These contracts are void. The subsidiaries are shells. By Monday, your money would have been in the Cayman Islands and Mr. Castellan would have been unreachable." Silence. Absolute. Crushing. Webb looked at his contract, at the signature he'd added just hours ago. His face went grey. $47 million? "Higher pension fund investment," Morrison said gently. "It would have been gone." Another investor, younger, arrogant earlier, sank into his chair. "Jesus Christ." Castellan's composure finally shattered. "You have no proof. This is circumstantial. My lawyers—" "Your lawyers will be busy." Morrison produced more documents. "We subpoenaed your offshore accounts an hour ago." "The Swiss transfers you arranged?" "We have records." "The Cayman backups?" "We have those too. We also have testimony from your CFO, who decided cooperation was preferable to federal prison." Castellan's face turned to stone. Morrison nodded to her agents. They moved forward with handcuffs. "You can't—" "I'm Richard Castellan. You're a criminal." Morrison's voice cut like steel. "And you're under arrest." The handcuffs clicked shut. The sound echoed in the silent room. Webb stood slowly. He walked toward Maya, who still stood frozen in the doorway. "You saved us," he said quietly. "You risked everything to save strangers." Maya's voice came out as a whisper. "I just told the truth. Just the truth." Webb smiled sadly. "The rarest thing in the world." 3 months later, Maya stood in the federal courthouse gallery watching the sentencing. Castellan in an orange jumpsuit looked smaller somehow. Less golden. The judge's voice was cold. 17 counts of wire fraud, 9 counts of securities fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Richard Castellan, you orchestrated a scheme to defraud investors of tens of millions of dollars. Your actions represent a profound betrayal of trust. Castellan stared straight ahead. Empty. 23 years in federal prison. The gavel fell. Maya exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Outside the courthouse, Harrison Webb waited with the other investors. They'd formed a coalition, not just for recovery, but for reform, for protecting others from predators like Castellan. "Maya," Webb approached with an envelope. "The investors wanted you to have this. It's not payment. You can't pay someone for integrity. Consider it a scholarship fund." Maya opened it. Her hands shook. "Full tuition for law school. Living expenses for 3 years. A stipend for books. I can't." "You can. You will." Webb's smile was genuine. "We also wrote letters to every law school in the state. MIT, Harvard, Boston University. You'll have your choice. Boston University. Her dream school. The one she'd never thought she could afford." Professor Chen appeared beside her. "I may have also written a letter, possibly 2. MIT seemed particularly interested." Maya's eyes burned. "You didn't have to. You taught my class more about integrity than I could in a semester of lectures." Professor Chen's voice was gruff with emotion. "The question isn't whether you deserve this. The question is what you'll do with it." Maya thought about her grandmother, about the watch on her wrist, about invisible people who saw everything. "I'll make sure others don't have to be invisible to be heard," she said. The Grandeur Hotel had called 3 times, offering her job back with a promotion. She'd declined. That world, of serving champagne to people who looked through her, belonged to someone else now. She started law school in September. Full scholarship, corporate law focus, white-collar crime specialization. Her first day she wore emerald green. Not a tie this time, a blazer, the color of someone who belonged. In her apartment, a better one now, closer to campus, she kept one memento from that night. A newspaper clipping. The headline, "Waitress exposes billion-dollar fraud." Beneath it, her grandmother's watch, still ticking. Maya stood on the courthouse steps as autumn wind scattered leaves around her feet. The city stretched below, golden in the late afternoon sun. She thought about that night, about the moment she'd dropped the champagne tray, about the choice between silence and truth. Truth hadn't been convenient. It had cost her job, her safety, her peace. It had required courage she didn't know she possessed, but silence would have cost more. It would have cost her grandmother's legacy, her own integrity, the futures of people who trusted a smile and a gold pen. Power, Maya had learned, doesn't come from money or status. It doesn't come from corner offices or magazine covers. It comes from the courage to speak when silence would be easier. From choosing principle over protection, she'd been invisible for years, moving through rooms of wealthy people who never saw her as anything but background. But invisibility had given her something they lacked: perspective. She'd seen how power operated when it thought no one was watching, and she'd learned that the most dangerous thing to the corrupt is someone they underestimated. Maya touched her grandmother's watch. Its weight felt different now. Not an anchor, a compass. Truth is the only currency worth having. Her grandmother had died fighting a system designed to silence people like them. Maya had spent years preparing to fight differently. With law books instead of desperation, with knowledge instead of rage. She'd learned that justice doesn't always come easy. Sometimes it comes from a waitress with a camera phone. Sometimes it comes from refusing to stay invisible. Sometimes it comes from believing truth matters more than safety. The courthouse doors opened behind her. Professor Chen emerged, briefcase in hand. "Ready?" he asked. Maya smiled. Her first day of law school started tomorrow. Her first class, Ethics in Corporate Law. She'd spent years learning to disappear, and now she'd spend years learning to make sure others could be seen. "Ready?" she said. They walked down the courthouse steps together. Behind them, the building stood solid, a monument to justice, to truth, to all the invisible people who'd found their voices. Maya's voice was just beginning.